Now the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. In for Greg Corombos, I'm Bret, joined by Jim Geraghty. Hey, Jim, it's a Friday, isn't it?
Yeah, and TGIF, I think it's been what started out as a very slow week has turned into a very dramatic and serious week, and so we may be a little less jovial than we usually are, but nonetheless, it's a week that makes you want to drink.
It sure does, and let's get right underway with the good martini. If anything good could possibly come out of what happened yesterday with the downing of the Malaysian airliner, it's got to be that at least we know who did it, and I understand you are pleasantly surprised with the response from Samantha Power?
Yeah, on 2 points. One, now this is a CNN report. It's not like the government has come out, anyone in the U.S. government has come out and said officially, we know it was Russian separatists, but that information is leaking. So one, there's a good portion of, you might say, circumstantial evidence pointing in this direction. The separatists have been shooting down planes for a while. It's known that they had the type of launcher that would be necessary to take down planes at that height. And the government of the Ukraine had released that audio tape of two separatists speaking to a Russian intelligence official discussing shooting down the plane. Now, is it possible it's doctored or edited or something? Sure, but be a big risk on the part of the Ukrainians to do that. And now apparently U.S. intelligence with a combination of technical information and perhaps human intelligence resources as well pretty much now know this was done by the separatists. On the Samantha Power front, our secretary, our ambassador to the United Nations, made her presentation of what we know and what we don't know, but what is reasonable to conclude at this point this morning. It's probably just about a half hour before we started taping this podcast. Listeners of this podcast know I am not a fan of the Obama administration in many, many ways, but I think this was just the right tone. It was not alarmist and not necessarily waving the bloody shirt. She didn't get ahead of anything that is publicly known, but it was deadly serious, and it was laying the responsibility for this very much at the feet of Russia and pointing out all the things that Russia had done to exacerbate the conflict in eastern Ukraine and perhaps arming these guys. So the President of the United States, this is kind of a good segue to our bad martini. The President will be speaking in a very short while from now. We'll see what kind of comments he has, but after a very spotty day from the administration, somebody in this administration is finally talking about this issue and discussing it and making the case for Russian responsibility the way you'd like to see it done, just in a very professional, straightforward, Joe Friday, just the facts manner.
Okay, well, so we do have a good martini here, and we are transitioning out of this bad martini, which is kind of an ugly martini. And it's, what do we do? What can we do? I mean, what do we do?
Yeah,
is the president continuing to be tuned out? Does he speak and then believe that it's now been settled? What happens next, Jim?
Yeah, it's a terrific question, and I think it's still unresolved. One of the complications of this is that for quite a time yesterday, there was no information about whether there were Americans on board. Then yesterday, there was a report widely distributed, but nobody could actually ever attribute that there were 23 Americans on board. The official word this morning is that there is no one who got on board with a U.S. passport, but that doesn't necessarily mean there are no Americans on board because some people have dual citizenship. So the government is still nailing down whether there were any U.S. citizens on this plane. If there are, this goes from being something terrible and tragic and outrageous that occurs far away to a deliberate act that killed American citizens. And that's not the sort of thing the U.S. government can just shrug its shoulders at. If indeed Americans were killed, and if indeed Russian separatists were responsible for that, I look at this and I said, there's got to be some sort of U.S. reaction. And I don't know whether it has to be, overt action, covert action, hacking. We have lots of tools in our toolbox, but if you kill Americans, you got to pay a price. And I don't just mean reparations. And I think that, the kind of the consequences to this towards Russia, even if Vladimir Putin never gave the order and said, okay, guys, shoot down this passenger airliner, I think that probably the proper metaphor here is reckless endangerment. I mean, he put all of these weapons, including these anti-aircraft weapons that can shoot down airliners, in the hands of a bunch of guys who are, pretty much vicious thugs to begin with. And according to that audio released by the Ukrainians, just unbelievably dumb thugs who upon seeing the report that, wait a minute, if this is a Ukrainian plane, why does it say Malaysian Airlines on the side? The one guy says, they must have spies.
Spies.
It must be in disguise or something. And it's almost funny, except we're talking about the deaths of nearly 300 people here.
Absolutely.
So my attitude, I want to see the Russian separatists pay a severe price over this, and then I want to see Russia pay a price for this because, as I wrote in the Morning Jolt, kind of paraphrasing what P.J. O'Rourke had said, this is putting whiskey and the car keys and high explosives in the hands of teenagers. Dire, terrible consequences coming out of arming these separatists should not have been all that surprising to Putin or anybody else.
No doubt. And as this ugly chapter is going to continue to be revealed to us moving forward, we unfortunately, I see the waiter bringing us a very crazy, odd, weird martini, because in the middle of this and in the middle of the weird response by the administration yesterday, Jen Psaki, spokeswoman for John Kerry's State Department, tweeted, what did she tweet yesterday? It wasn't about this. It was about fashion, Jim? What?
Yeah, it was some article about fashion and women, and you look at that, you're almost thinking was her Twitter account hacked or something? Unfortunately, it's kind of part of a pattern of this administration. There's been a lot of mocking and criticism of what they call hashtag diplomacy.
Sure.
Everything from the Boko Haram kidnapping of the schoolgirls to the initial Russian moves into Crimea that we were going to put out hashtags and rally the world community through Twitter. But then in the broader context of Obama's actions yesterday, I mean, the word breaks of this. Everybody's kind of in shock and disbelief. The president now, there's a lot that still isn't known. I can understand, does the president necessarily need to run down to the Situation Room and monitor everything? I don't know. But he went out and he did his burger event up in Delaware, and then he goes off and mentions the shooting down of the plane or the downing of the plane, shall we say, at that point in a 40 seconds or so. Then gives his usual partisan speech about infrastructure spending. And then he goes on to New York City for two of his fundraisers. And people are asking, what does it take to get the president to cancel fundraisers? And there kind of is this mentality of this, the no drama Obama. They are going to continue with their assigned schedule no matter what. Then you look back and say, this is the president who went to hold a campaign rally on September 12th, 2012, when most Americans were waking up to the news that, Ambassador Chris Stevens and three other Americans had been murdered by terrorists. He continued with an event as the Fort Hood shooting was going on, or word had just broken of that. When the underwear bomber tried to blow up a plane over Detroit on Christmas Day 2009, the president did not address the country for 3 days. Bret, I have this feeling this is the only time we haven't heard from the president for 3 days, and naturally it's the one time we actually want to hear from him after an attempted terror attack. So there's this very strange philosophy in the Obama White House that when something very dramatic and kind of ominous and scary and a life and death matter is breaking somewhere else, they're not going to divert from their schedule. They're not going to change. They're going to act like it's no big deal. And in most of these cases, it is a big deal. And so it just kind of seems like this strange detachment. One of my favorite bloggers and a guy I consider a friend, Ace of Spades, over at his blog, started having something of a panic attack yesterday as he sees the president going around and doing his, having hugs and hanging around with people, doing the cheeseburger joint in Delaware, saying what we just had, are there other attacks in the works here? What is the president doing here? And some people throw around the, my pet goat scenario and things like that. But that was 7 minutes, the president just went on with his day after Americans were killed by foreign action. And it's just a strange detachment on the part of this president. Now, he's probably going to be speaking very shortly. Maybe he will handle this just right. But it just seems like a very, it fits the crazy martini to have this just odd, unexplained approach to crises from this White House.
Absolutely. And for an administration that always prided itself on being in touch with what people feel out there and the social media and all that. I mean, it was everywhere. People going, where is he? What's he doing? This is nuts. Jim, listen, it has been a very eventful week. We have the marginally good martinis, which was at least we have an idea at this point of who it is behind the shoot down of the aircraft, and the surprisingly, refreshingly strong response from Samantha Powers at the United Nations. The very bad one, asking the question, what is it that we can do? What happens now? What's this president going to do? And the oddball, crazy, weird Martini, Jen Psaki tweeting out fashion column commentary in the midst of the shoot down of civilian airliners. It's just bizarre. Listen, man, it's been great sitting with you for the last couple of days. Greg Columbus is going to be back behind the microphone on Monday, and I appreciate you letting me hang with you here on the 3 Martini Lunch. I am Bret Winterble. That's Jim Geraghty. It's the 3 Martini Lunch. Have a great weekend. Talk to you Monday.